Solo 15 out of Vic Firth's The Solo Timpanist presents a number of challenges, not the least of which are all of the tuning changes that take place throughout the piece. The first step in approaching any new timpani work is to understand the harmony that's embedded within all of the tunings. Before even playing a note on this particular solo, take time to sit at the piano and play the collection of pitches within each different region or section of the piece. Take the three notes, hear them together, go to the next section, hear the next three notes together. When you have notes that move within a section, hear exactly how they move and by what intervals and what that sounds like in your ear, so that when you sit down at the drums, you'll have those pitches in mind and you'll have those harmonies, for lack of a better way to describe it, to inform you through the process of learning the piece. The solo is in an odd meter, 7/8, and the division of the bar is not consistent throughout the solo. Make sure that you go through and mark off how each bar is being divided. For example, the beginning of the piece, we have a very clear 2-2-3 division. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Make sure that you feel that very organically, that it's not something later on in the process that you necessarily need to count, but that just sort of sits well within you. Within the first section of the piece, we get a great deal of rhythmic variety. The first two bars, of course, divide the bar up into 2-2-3, which is all very, very clear. And in the third bar, we now have a little bit of a change. The first two beats of the bar actually split into a triplet division. So you're sort of playing a 2 over that 3 feel. Lean on this a little bit in order to get to the next big beat in the bar. Make sure that all of these syncopations are lining up, of course, perfectly with the metronome, but make sure they also make sense in your head with how you're dividing up each bar. In the first couple of bars, you have a great opportunity to really put out your best big full timpani sound. The piece starts with 2 quarter notes. You can really embrace those notes, get as much sound and tone out of the drum as possible. These notes have a little bit more weight to them as opposed to some of the faster notes that come later, whether they're 8th notes, 16th notes, triplets, whatever they may be. But these first 2 notes really set the tone for your sound as a timpanist throughout the rest of the piece. There are 2 glissandi that happen at the end of this first section. You begin the piece with your foot on the pedal of the 32-inch timpani so that you're prepared to make this change as soon as it comes in. We're moving from a G to a C, perfect fourth. And the rhythm here is different per each different glissando. The first one is just the length of a quarter note, and the next one is the length of a dotted quarter note. Make sure that you're pacing each glissandi in the best possible way. In order to move towards the arrival note, hesitate just a little bit, and then you can scoop towards the end, towards your destination. In bar 8, we have our first bar of rest, which allows for our first true tuning change. The note that we glissandied up to, if we're doing all of that on the 32-inch drum, that C then comes down to an F sharp. Make sure that in each of the tuning changes, that your tuning change itself is felt as if you're playing it, meaning you need to do this rhythmically and understand exactly when in the bar you're going to make this change. The C drops down to the F sharp. As you drop, make sure that the hand stays on the head so that we don't get any residual resonance coming from the head. With all of the tuning changes throughout the work, make sure that you're really familiar with the drums that you're playing on and that you've gone through exercises with how to manipulate the pedals. You need to understand the instruments that you're playing. You need to understand how the pedals react. You need to understand how much tension is on the pedal, so that you know exactly how to move the pedal in these very, very fast changes. As you make these tuning changes, just as we use muscle memory to play the notes on the instruments with our arms and with our hands, so too do our feet have muscle memory and understand how to make the slightest shift in order to get to the new pitch. While we always want to recognize this pitch and check this pitch with our ear, some of these changes are so fast that we really do need to make sure that we're trusting the movement of our foot to go exactly where it needs to go in order to hit the desired pitch. In the second section of the piece, starting at bar 9, we have what soon becomes, I think, the most difficult passage in the piece. In the end of bar 9 and in the end of the following bar, bar 10, we have what amounts to basically a walking bass line. And we have to sort of walk down a scale incrementally, play a couple other notes, and then walk right back up. In order to do this, you really have to avoid the tendency which we all have of sort of scooping down or easing down into the pitch. This technique really does need to be one of quick movements which hit the desired pitch, and the movement can't happen until at the very, very last second. Really, if you think of the foot movement as accompanying the stroke itself, that will yield the best results. As you can see in this passage, the difference between a whole step and a half step is not just what it looks like on the page, but also correlates and corresponds to the movement of your foot. You'll have to go twice as far, obviously, to gather the whole step as you will the half step in this range of the drum. Make sure that those movements are really well thought out, really well planned, and that you're executing them the exact same way every single time. No guessing. Make sure that those movements are very quick and very precise. In measure 11, we have yet another tuning change, which gets us into measure 12, and please take note of the key change that we have here as well. The key signature actually gives us what is E major, and we get that tonic-dominant relationship right off the bat. A little bit later in this section, we have another challenging tuning episode, this time with glissandi, but also with a roll within the glissandi. The glissandi go from an E to a C sharp, back up to a D sharp, slight rest, and then a repetition of that same exact passage. This is one of those passages where you should really sit and hear it at the piano first before you attempt to do it on the drums. Keep the hands moving in as smooth a roll as possible, and make sure that the movement of the pedal, the foot on the pedal, is achieving exactly what's written on the page, that we really do get this fall of a minor third and then a raise of a major second. When we arrive at the D sharp, the first D sharp, we need to muffle and we need to reset so that we are able to get up to that E at the beginning of the next bar. I delay getting to that E until just as I'm about to play it, so as not to have any sound or scoop of sympathetic resonance in the head in that rest. In the next section of the piece that starts at bar 25, we soon get into some busier rhythmic playing and some more complex rhythmic playing that actually puts us in a difficult position. In the passage that begins in bar 31, we have some fast cross-sticking over the 16th note triplets. This has been foreshadowed a little bit earlier in bar 28 and 29 with the 16th notes cross-sticking. In both situations, you need to make sure that your mechanism, your body, is set up in the best possible way so that we're getting evenness of sound and evenness of stroke even while doing something a little bit more acrobatic. Be very careful not to overemphasize the low drum as we come over to it. And be very careful not to forget about the 29-inch drum, which is the note which is sort of sandwiched in between these outer movements. In measures 34 and 35, we have a repeated series of two-note groupings between the D and the A. Make sure that in this passage you're striving for a perfect evenness within those two strokes on the drum that each hand is playing on. Make sure here too, in order to achieve the articulation that we need, that we do have just a little bit of a bite or a dig to the stroke in order to really get the rhythm out. We do want to hear this very, very specific rhythm, these running 16th notes within this wash of timpani resonance that we're creating. The final tuning change, which sets up the final section of the piece in bars 36, 37, and 38, is really the fastest of the bunch. Here we actually have to change all 3 pitches and manipulate all 3 drums. In order to do this, you really need to hold yourself accountable to the time. Practice this with the metronome, first slowly and then speed it up, but make sure you're not cheating at all. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure that these tuning changes are done in a rhythmic sort of way, meaning you're changing your 29-inch drum on a certain beat of a certain bar, and likewise with the 26 and the 32. In order to achieve this fast tuning change, I have my feet ready on the 29 and the 26 in bar 36. As soon as I play that final D, I'm muffling out the A on the 29-inch drum and already moving that up to a B flat so that I've taken care of that drum. That way in bar 37 and 38, I just have to focus on getting the octave Fs between the 26 and the 32. As much as we want to rely heavily on our ear and really understand what the pitch collections sound like, there's nothing wrong with using tuning gauges. Make sure that you have fully operational, fully functional tuning gauges on your timpani. Make sure that the gauges are set accurately every single practice session that you go in to play. School drums typically get used a lot, and one of your friends or colleagues may have just used it and changed the gauges all around. Every single time you set up to play, go through with an electronic tuner and make sure that those gauges are preset exactly as you need them. Now, this doesn't take over for any ear training that you've done as you're working up this piece. Your ear always needs to stay open, and you always need to be able to recognize a false pitch or a slightly incorrect pitch if and when it comes. But make your life a little bit easier by exploring what you can do with the tuning gauges, especially in some of these faster tuning passages.